let's hope this works. It appears to be working. Okay, so again, this PDF is on Box under Project 4. The parts you would need for today if you want to follow along. Again, this is an encouragement, not a requirement. Let's see, to do this demo, I think you need the camera, this LiPo battery, and this USB-C port. So if you want to follow along step by step, I would download these 3 files, as well as, if you go up a folder, this PDF right here. And just like all our other PDFs, it kind of gives you an idea on how to follow along. So just start off with, you know, depending on what object you choose, you may need to find parts on GrabCAD. Again, if you don't want to use the parts that I have provided for you. And if you find parts on GrabCAD, again, this is maybe a bit repetitive now, but you may not always find SolidWorks parts, in which case Parasolid, IGES, or STEP all work well with SolidWorks. Things like STL, it'll open in SolidWorks, but I think it's just an image. It's like a graphic image, so you can't really, this process will not work with an STL as far as I know. So once you have your parts downloaded, and let me make sure I have this open. The 7-volt LiPo is what you want to follow along with the demo. When it comes to your project and your camera, you can choose what you want. This is the LiPo for today's demo. But I mean, if you want to use this one, the main difference is this one is flat. This is like a flat square. This LiPo is like a double A battery, like a shorter AA battery is the proportion of this one. But yeah, for today's demo, the 3 parts are kind of, it's really, really small here. I can try and CSI enhance this. But these are the 3 files, the camera, this is that flat battery, and then this USB-C controller. And in real life, this is actually incredibly small. Like again, this is a USB-C port. So if you can picture the size of that in your head, this camera is actually quite small. And again, it's up to you what kind of camera you want to design, right? It could be a security camera, a doorbell camera, personal camera, driver cam, something for truck driver, bicyclists, commuters. I had last time the only thing that I don't think works is a student last year tried to redesign a point and shoot camera. And I feel that they never got to a good story as to why they chose to do a point and shoot camera, because the kind of question was, why wouldn't you just use the one on your cell phone? And if you are using a point and shoot, you probably wouldn't use a lens that's this small. You would probably have something similar to like a DSLR. So we talked about like a camera for the elderly that you know, gave them a more familiar camera shape. Big buttons, they didn't really want to go that route. We talked about a camera for a child, so like something that can teach children photography. They also didn't really want to go that route. So try and have a good story or a reason, or user at least, for who you're designing this for. And again, the camera it's just provided for you. It's not something you have to use or do. Okay, so I'm just going to launch in. I'm going to put this off to my side screen here just so I can look at the steps. So I'm going to go ahead and open up these files. I already have them downloaded. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and open, and then there's also a touch screen LCD in there, and again, a speaker. So use what you want, but for the demo, if you want to follow along one for one, it is those items I mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and open this camera first. Now in this downloaded file, this is what I'm going to open. I believe it's this OCam. I don't know what file type this is. It doesn't say. But anyway, for me, it should be clear. These other ones, I believe, are all JPEGs. So click on this and go ahead and click open. And you'll notice it kind of has this like weird, I mean, when you open non-native SolidWorks files, I know the thing had a SolidWorks icon, but I don't think this is a native SolidWorks file. it has sort of these weird icons. And again, we'll learn how to work with this. So you basically want to open each of these file parts. So here's the camera. I'm now going to open up the battery. So this 3.7-volt LiPo. And here again, you got some couple options. There is a SolidWorks one. You could also open the IGES. Or so this is a step. If you get one of these pop-ups, like do you want to run import diagnostics, just say no. So based on this icon here, I'm assuming this other one is also a step file. And then the final one you want to open is the USB-C port. This one is a native SolidWorks file. So this one will come in with a tree. Now, again, these are all good files because a lot of them are centered on the origin. Nice and clean. Again, depending on your future careers, who you're working with, where you're getting files from, even possibly files from GrabCAD, some of these files may come in off-center or a little bit funny, but it looks like all of these are good. So the demo says, it asks the first thing you do is to save each of these out as a SolidWorks part. I think that's best practice. You could argue it's an unnecessary step with what we're about to do, but it's what I typically do. It basically, that way if there's any like confusion or complication with weird things like this, it basically converts it to a SolidWorks part. So I'm simply going to go to File, Save As, go down here to Part, and then just navigate to anywhere to a folder. So I'm going to create a new folder here and say Demo 2. Say this is camera. Again, having the file type be part and hit save. And again, please stop me if at any time you have a question. If I do something too fast or you miss it, either just pop something up in the chat or hop on your microphone and ask me to stop. So again, saving this as a part under Demo 2. LiPo battery name is fine. And now finally this port. I mean, it's already a part, but we can save it again. File, Save As. Whoops, a little bit too far back there. That pop-up was saying, hey, this SolidWorks file was created before 2019. If you save it, it can only be opened in 2019. I just hit yes, that's okay. Okay, so now I have those components saved. Everything open still, though, is the original step files and stuff, so I'm not saving those. But now I have my SolidWorks parts here. So it's sort of like, it's like steps to like clean the file or basically import them to SolidWorks. Again, you could argue that that's unnecessary. I believe once the file's open in SolidWorks, you could directly put them into an assembly if you wanted. But that's essentially the next step. I'm going to open all these back up now as their native SolidWorks parts. And then I'm going to create an assembly. So here you can see already, before I answer this pop-up, this is now a SolidWorks part of the camera. You can see that these are now features for each body. So that's how we know now that it's a native SolidWorks file. It's asking me if we want feature recognition. I believe that SolidWorks tries to automatically create a tree based on how this would be built. I never use it. It takes a while. Sometimes it bogs down and it's not always accurate, so I just hit no. This is asking about opening external reference documents, and I typically say also don't open any reference documents. There we go. Now I noticed, and I noticed this yesterday too, for some reason, even though we saved this as a part, it didn't convert, or it still has this weird icon. But it doesn't matter. This is why I was saying like there's a chance saving these as part files. It depends on the file. It's just sort of best practice. It cleans it up here. This next step is basically the final step to create your CAD underlay. So the next thing the sheet has you do, so we've done step 2, opened the parts and saved it as a part file, is you want to create an assembly with your parts aligned on the proper planes. So this is a bit of an assembly recap. So File, New, Assembly. And now the first thing I want to put in here is the camera, because that's, to me, is the most important object. So I'm just going to drop that in there. Now if we highlight these planes, we can see where our center of origin is. Again, it's sort of personal preference here. To me, it makes sense to have the camera centered on the origin. So this left to right file and this right plane and this top plane makes sense to me. However, I believe this is the front plane here. The front plane being in the middle of this PC board is a bit weird to me. Now, when I drop this file in, I just hit the check mark, and what that does is, you can see if I try and drag this around, it says the selected component is fixed. So if you want to move something that's fixed, you want to right-click on this and look for this option that says float. And now if you click on this, now we can drag the object around. So like I mentioned before, I was happy with the top planes, so I can select both of them by holding Control and clicking on both, and clicking Mate, the paperclip up here. If it's a different layout for you, it's right here. So I'm going to add that. Again, I want to expand my tree, so I'm going to click on this so I can see everything. I liked the right plane, and the right plane to me made sense. Again, to have the camera centered on the origin makes sense to me. The next thing that I'm going to mate, I didn't like where the front plane was, because it's halfway through this PC board, or it was. I want this front plane to be the base of the camera. So the base of the camera is sitting on this PC board. I'm going to click on this, and now we have this aligned. And so for me, now the planes are where I want them to be for my underlay. The next thing I'm going to do now is insert the other components. I guess before I move right along, are there any questions so far? I will take that as a resounding no. Again, please stop me at any time. I'm going to go and insert the battery and the USB-C controller. So again, I'm going to go to Insert Component, Existing Part and Assembly. And we will drop in the LiPo battery. So if you don't want to always load this view of Insert Component up, if you click on this little pin shape, it keeps it visible. So again, I can click on LiPo battery here and drop it in behind the camera, and I can click on the USB-C and drop it in. Now, one thing the demo suggests is putting in multiple aspects of a component, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you're following along one-to-one, I would put in 2 of these USB ports right now, which is maybe a little bit different than what the sheet says. But again, this is a bit of an assembly recap. So we're just going to work on one thing at a time. Firstly, we're going to take this battery and look at where the planes are. So we have this right plane here, and maybe we want it to align with our right plane. So again, I'm holding Control down and clicking on both of these, and now I can go here and click on Mate, and it will slide them over. It's going to default to coincident. And I can go ahead and check that, or hit the check mark. So now that the right planes are on top of each other, they're aligned. But you know, it's perpendicular to the camera. This wouldn't be a really tight package. We probably want this to be parallel to the the PC board. So we can find out what plane is this one. So it's the top plane. This is where it's a bit different, because for our camera, it's the front plane here. So now, because I'm in this mate property dialog, I don't have to hold Control. I selected the top plane and it loaded it in here. And it's highlighted blue, so I know it's asking me for another entry point here. It's basically saying, okay, you have the top plane, what do you want to mate it to? So in this case, again, this is the top plane in the battery. For me, I want it mated to the front plane in the camera. And you can see it rotates the battery into the correct orientation. But right now the setting is at coincident. So they're overlapped on each other. And obviously we don't want we want this to be realistic and believable. So we need to give a bit of space between the PC board and the battery. So instead of coincident, I'm just simply going to select parallel. This way, again, it will keep them parallel, but I will be able to move this battery back and forth. So I'm going to hit that checkbox. To show you I can move it back and forth, I'm going to exit out of this mate property feature and just show you now that basically all I've done is I've made this battery parallel. And I can't drag it left to right because it's been mated to this right plane. So that's why it's fixed on this up and down orientation right now. I can, however, if I take a front view, I can still slide it up and down, which is the remaining mate to be made here. So that's a matter of taking this front plane for the battery and the top plane for the camera here, and then again clicking mate. And now basically this battery is locked except for front and back. I mean, if you really wanted, you could probably, like, I could select this face and this face and mate them together. That's another thing I could have done instead of doing that step for parallel. Of course, you know, you may want this port to point in different directions, in which case it all just comes down on how you mate this, on how you mate the battery. So if you ever need to edit the mates, there's a whole list of them at the bottom. There's also a list of each individual mate for the component at the top folder here under the object. So for example, like I said, this parallel mate is no longer necessary because now I have these two faces coincident. So I could delete this out. It's asking me to confirm. Now let's say I wanted to flip like this port to the right side. I believe if I right click on this and say edit feature, so again I'm editing the mate. If you click on this mate alignment, you can see, I guess it doesn't quite work now because that's where the parallel might have made more sense, because now it's keeping this face to this aligned. But anyway, that's a quick way to flip it. I'll just continue down this path with it flipped and show you how to fix it. The error that it's giving me is it's basically, I think it's telling me that this mate here is changing, the face-to-face mate. Here, if I get out of that setting, hopefully you can now see what I'm saying is the problem. It's because this face is mated to this one. So because we flip this now, the battery is now consuming the PC board. So again, in order to fix that, you can find the object you want to fix, look in the mate folder. Here we go. We see the face and the PC board face. We can edit this one. It's obvious. We can see it because it's highlighted for us. And I can find which face I want to change. It kind of outlines it in a light blue. So if I click on this one, it's kind of outlining the PC board. I can also see actually no, that's confusing. Okay, sorry, it doesn't outline it in a light blue. It outlines it in a dark blue. But you can also read the name. So I can select the face on the LiPo battery here and hit delete. And now it has the face of the PC board selected. If I want to change the face on the battery, I delete it, and now I select a new face. All right, sorry, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. Wait, why didn't that work? I don't know why it's flipping it. That's really weird. So let's try this. What I would do then in this case, I would just completely delete this mate out. I would completely drag this away. I would select this face and this face, and now I would click mate. A little bit down the rabbit hole there on how to flip something. So if your mate's doing something weird, just completely delete it and start again. Okay. Next up, what we want to do is align these USB-C controllers. So if you zoom way in, you can see there's actually a little flat piece at the bottom foot of this. And now it would make sense, to me at least, for this to be on the PC board. You could argue that doesn't the battery have something in the back that is going through the battery? Yes, good question. It does. This, I believe, is a video port for the camera. If you wanted to plug it into a screen or something, you can do a couple things. So one, you can totally For project 4, you can choose to ignore certain things. All that I ask is that it's like loosely believable. So on a basic level, if you're doing something electronic, it should have the components. So again, in this case, a camera. It should probably have a PC board. It should have a battery and then a way to charge the battery. As far as having like a port to plug into a screen and all that stuff, I'm not necessarily worried about those details. So good observation there. I'll come back and address this after this assembly portion. I'll show you how you can either get rid of it or move it to somewhere more logical. But good question there. And again, the bottom line is I want something that's like believable. It doesn't have to be bulletproof though, as far as I'm concerned. We're just looking for something that feels and looks real. It's kind of like the final step of this class of like, if you're designing a real object, the final step would be having it have internal components. Okay, aligning the USB-C ports. Again, just simple mates. I'm going to select this flat here and this flat here and just click on mate. Now, of course, again, you see now it's buried in the PC board. So again, I'm going to flip the mate alignment to get it to stand on top. And now, of course, you can see it's like kind of at a funny angle. I'm going to do the same one with the same thing with this one. Select this flat, select this PC board. I'm holding Control to select both of them. Click on mate, and again, flip it so it stands on there. The reason that we have 2 ports in here is this allows you to do different like kind of concept exploration. So we'll start with this one. I'll get the right plane here, and I believe it's the top plane here. So again, holding Control to select both of them, then clicking on mate, and that way now it's aligned. I'm going to click that checkbox. I'm going to do the same thing on this one here. So I can expand my tree this way. I can expand this one. This can be kind of confusing if you have 2 of the same name, remembering which one is which. I'm going to click on the right plane here, and actually this one will also be mated to the right plane. Now, again, the reasoning for this, so if I bring the sheet back, it says, consider putting multiple instances of parts in different locations. The reason for that is when you sketch on this, now you have multiple choices of sort of like where your object could be charged from. Again, so imagine it again, let's imagine we're designing a camera for a truck driver, like a driver camera. As you're coming up with the concepts, maybe one concept has the port on the top. I mean, I guess this is pretty much like, I guess when I say top, I guess I'm rolling back on it now because this is basically a camera centered on a square, so left or right, either way could be top. So you could make that argument. I guess so. Maybe actually, if I then go off of what I'm realizing now, maybe then I would delete this mate and maybe change it to be like this one, mate this face to this face. And now maybe this is a little bit more of a unique option for our concepts. Maybe there's one concept where the port comes in from the front. Or actually, it probably would make more sense to come off the back, something like this, right? So again, you could edit this and flip it. And now maybe it would have to be up here. So this would be the reason for having multiple components, is now you have 2 options as you come up with a concept. You could have the charging port come off the back or come off the side. As far as believability, you could always, for example, this PC board is arbitrary. You could build it bigger if you wanted. So basically extrude a square so it touches this USB-C port. But you can also completely leave it arbitrary. It's not too much of an imagination that there might be a wire here. So again, the components are representational. They don't have to be perfect or accurate. So don't worry about floating things. Like you could totally float this USB-C all the way to the edge of the battery. I would say don't worry about that. Okay, the final step here would be to save this out as a part file. But because I've worked with this before, I am aware of some things that can make your file be a little bit lighter, I guess, in terms of data. So work a bit smoother. So this next step, if you're just following along for the demo's sake, feel free to ignore it. If you are following along because you plan to actually use these components, I would definitely do this step. It's a minor one, but I think it helps. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this USB-C port. And under here, you can see there's a lot of bodies, okay? And the reason there's a lot of bodies is each of these pins is its own body. So when you import this and make your CAD underlay, this is then becomes just a bunch of extra features in there. It makes the file just a little bit bigger and a little bit more cluttered. I mean, one thing we could do is just delete these out, but in a rendering, and because there's this level of detail, this port will look really cool, especially if you apply the proper kind of copper material to this. It'll look realistic, which is what we're going for. So simply to combine all these bodies, it's just to put a simple extrude command that ties them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this flat face here. I'm going to click on Sketch. Now I can hit Alt-N so that I'm looking normal to my sketch plane. And I can simply just click a rectangle. As long as the rectangle goes either side of all of these ports, you should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and click on Extrude. Now, obviously, we don't want to see this extrusion. We want to hide it inside of this black body here. So this is a bit of a recap on extrusions. So it might not hurt to pay attention here, especially if, I know extrusions are basic, but as I'm grading Project 3, I'm finding sometimes opportunities to remind you all of some of these settings. So remember, an extrusion can have, it can start from different locations. It's always going to default start from the sketch plane, which in this case is this black face here. But in this, what I want to do is I actually want to offset the start point. And this is an incredibly small part, so even 0.1 millimeters, you can see it starts the extrusion off at a distance. And I want to hide it inside of this, again, this black body here. So I'm going to flip this, and I'm going to flip the direction. So that's the from. You can think of direction 1 as the to. Where is it going to? There's different settings here, like up to surface, offset from surface. In this case, blind is okay. Blind is just a simple number value. And again, it doesn't need to be big, just like 0.2, 0.1. And now we can see that this yellow body is completely hidden by the black body. And under feature scope, this is probably the thing that I've had to remind people of the most, is you want to double check whether you have merge result checked or not. In this case, we do want to merge result because we're trying to merge all of these ports to be a single body. So we want that checked. Here it's going to default to auto select. And if we leave that at auto select, it will merge the black body and all these copper bodies together. But we want to keep them separate for the render. So I'm going to uncheck auto select. And here where it's prompting me, I'm going to select each of these ports. And now it takes these like 8 bodies and it will make them into one. And it'll just make our file a little bit lighter. Again, if you're planning to work with this, that's a step I encourage that you take. Now you'll notice that there's all these bodies still too. We can probably, if you want to do the same process, I won't do it now. I guess I will. You could either delete these out or do the same process. I mean, it's the exact same thing, creating a sketch on here. Extrude, flip it, offset it by like 0.1 in the correct direction, merge result, and just select only these things that you want merged. But honestly, these ones are probably kind of hidden. You probably won't see these in the render, so that's why I think it's less important. So now look at this. This file is going to be a lot lighter when we save this out. This will make more sense in a minute here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save on that so that it updates in the assembly. You could save this assembly. Probably be a good idea. You could save as and say like gut setup. But the final step of this demo, and really to kind of get to the end result, is to go ahead and hit File, Save As. So they got set up by saving the raw assembly. Now you can edit stuff. If you need to add another port or move or rotate something, it keeps it flexible. The final step, or let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Yeah, step 4, in the assembly, save as a SOLIDWORKS part. You can see it's highlighted here. So the final step is File, Save As. And here, just go ahead and select part. And here you can name this as whatever you want, P4, CAD underlay, camera underlay. Let's call it cam. Hit save. And now when I go to open this file, here's why we combine those bodies. Again, do you want feature recognition? Say no. If we hadn't combined those bodies, there would be like 16 more of these imports. So this is how it lightens it. It just kind of combines and merges everything. I mean, you could also, if you really, this is also where you would delete them if you don't want them. So for example, like, and this is, if you remember back to that spin bike example I showed you all, this is where we went in and lightened some stuff. So for example, you can look for things to delete. So for example, to Maria's earlier question, if you don't want this port back here, you could either simply delete it or suppress it. Let's say you did want it, but you don't like where it is. This is where you can use your Move Body tool. Select this and simply move it to where you want it. For what it's worth, there is a setting in the Move Body tool that's similar to a mate feature setting. So for example, I can do this. I'm just hiding these components so that we can look at this. You could say Move Body, and you can select this body to move. And instead of this dialog, if you click on Constraints down here, now you have a mate setting dialog that's similar to an assembly. So for example, I could select this back face on this port, highlighted in purple now. And now is when I might want to see this body again. And now I could maybe select this face, and again click flip. And now this is pointing upwards. And I can say add. But it's a little bit more tricky because there's no central plane on here. If you wanted to orient this properly, you could select this face and this face and just say like be parallel, or give it a distance so it's offset, and again hit add. So those are some things you can do if you have parts that you either need to move after the fact. You can use the Move Body command, or you can just simply delete it out. So same thing, like if your part file at this stage has a lot of, I think there's like some unnecessary things in this battery. Let's look. Like this here, right? We don't see this body. It's not needed for the render. This icon means imported body. We can't see it. We don't need it. I can simply delete this. It'll make the file run lighter. For me, in my concept, I don't want this. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit delete. There's other things in here possibly. I guess in terms of like what to keep, what to delete, just think about what you might need for your rendering. I guess these are all necessary. I think you could argue that you probably don't need these things in the back if you wanted. If you're not sure whether to delete or keep it, you can always just hit suppress. And the nice thing now with this file is like none of these are going to move on you. What I typically do, again, at this point, like you saw with the spin bike earlier, is I'll select all of these, I'll right click on them and say add to new folder, and I'll just say call it an underlay. And now I'm ready to start working on this file. I can start by adding a sketch, and just think back to project 1, a sketch of whatever your design is. You can start to trace it for your master sketch and start to build around this. maybe it's simply starting with an extruded box, right? Uncheck merge result. So this is going to be key as you're working with guts in here, is to uncheck this merge result. Now, again, I do want to remind you all this: there's different schools of thought to SolidWorks. Some people some people would encourage, in terms of like concepting in SolidWorks, this is kind of like a loose way to work with a file around gut components. I was going to say some people would feel that you should still be working with this as an assembly, that this part that I just built be separate than this. This is a way to work within part files and come up with concepts. So again, different schools of thought, but if we were then now to like split this, put a part line, shell it, we have a very basic, clamshell around a camera box kind of thing. Does that make sense to everybody? Are there any questions on any of that? Okay, I'm going to assume everyone's good. Cool. I appreciate it. Or the confirmation. Okay. So honestly, at this point, if we were all together in class, this would be the time for you all to do this. Let's see. So what we'll do, we'll take a short break here. There is one more thing I want to show you for sketching on this, and that's like the final thing I'm going to show you today, like how to export this for sketching on. Yeah, let's take a 15-minute break. So at 2:25, if you need to walk away from your computer or something, just be back by 2:25. What I'll do then when I'm back, I mean, I'll be around now too, is I can open it up to individual questions as you kind of work on this, or feel free to work on project 4. We can see it as like, and I'll look at the time, maybe we'll say like 2:25, maybe we'll say between 2:25 and 3 will be kind of like the equivalent of working class time. Again, if we were all together physically, I would make it a requirement to be building this and following this demo. Since we're not, I would say between 2:25 and 3 o'clock can be just to work on project 4, whether you need to download files or what have you. I'll be here at the computer to answer questions. Don't be shy to ask it on this. I think any question is helpful to the class. It can be individual time. It could also be Daisy if you wanted to go over your choice. Provided you're not shy to talk about it with everyone here, I'm happy to answer questions on that too if people have individual questions about their choices. If you are shy about that, then maybe email me and I can use that time to reply to the email. But I'll also then be here if you have trouble setting this up. Then at 3, I'll talk about how to set this up as a sketch underlay and talk about next steps for the project. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we're on break. Again, this is, if you have any questions, you can ask them to me now. Otherwise, we'll pick back up at 2:25. I know we're on break. I'll hop back on the mic here as I'm opening up your file, Giovanna. Um, Daisy, just talking out loud some thoughts. Definitely good idea to try and make this a portfolio piece, and you're dead on that it would be helpful to be more than just an aesthetic exploration. Um, so one way you could approach this, if you want to go a little bit more in depth, is to approach it like um, I'm probably going to make this too long-winded, so I apologize. um, when I was in school, my frustration with some projects is that they gave us the solution, not the problem. And the way design things work, it's often a problem that you're trying to solve. So in some respects here, I'm doing what I did not like in school, and I'm giving you all a camera. And in many respects, a camera is a solution. It's not a problem. So one way to phrase your project, Daisy, would be to say, to identify where bad smells are problems, and start like with a mind map there, and just make a list of places where you think smell is an important issue. And from there you may discover, so just like if I'm spitballing off the bat, one thing I thought of is like a diaper genie. So like a trash can for diapers, smells a problem there. Maybe again, like a locker room. You could go a different way where maybe it's used for meditation. Could it be used in place of like incense? So you can mind map that. From there, you can pick a direction and think about the unique challenges. So if it is something like a diaper trash can, how does the air wick attach to it? Is it just an outlet that's near it? Maybe if it is for meditation, like maybe the person doesn't want to meditate near an outlet. Maybe it needs a battery. Maybe then the aesthetic becomes important of it, or maybe it becomes a ritualistic object. Does it turn on a specific way? Do you have to hold it? So these are kind of like, think of it, I guess, to make this shorter, think of it like a problem. The problem is smell and where smell is important, and then try and problem solve from there, and it may lead you down an interesting path, I would hope. Giovanna, I'm opening your file. Let's see. Surin, I looked at your file before class. It looked good. I like your choice of, I don't know if you're there right now. I know we're on break. Your choice of a thermostat, I think, is a good one. Yeah, I am going to do my best effort to help you all individually. So I appreciate these questions, Daisy and Giovanna, and anytime you all upload stuff, like feel free to use Box as kind of like a check-in. Just if you get in the habit of just uploading things on there, um, and I'll keep an eye on it. If I notice you upload something, maybe I need to change the Box settings so I get emails again. Let me think about this, but in terms of how we can best organize this, but I mean, you're all kind of doing it here. Like what I'll do, at least for now, for sure, is if you're uploading custom components, I will definitely check them. And if I won't necessarily get back to you, but I will only get back to you if there's an issue. If I believe there's an issue, I will let you know. If you don't hear from me, then you can assume, well, I guess there's a chance that I didn't see it. But as long as it's in this folder, I'll check it. You can always also just email me and ask. This file you sent, Giovanna, it looks pretty good at a glance. It cracks me up that we get these files from GrabCAD because they're all like different languages. This looks like French to me. Plan de toi. Plan de face. All right. So for what it's worth, this is just me and it's my preference. I would clean this up the same way we just did. I would drop this into an assembly. I would probably like get rid of the bodies you don't want. So like we don't need this. I like, at least I imagine you don't. I'm assuming this is an essential oils thing. Did I get that right? A diffuser? Is this for? Cool. Yeah. No, this is great. This is really good. I would, again, if it were me, like just to show you right now, because this is what I would do for in class, I would create a new assembly. Actually, you know what I would probably do? In this file, I'd probably select all these things that are not visible and just hit delete to bring up this delete body command. So now we have just these guts here, which I'm assuming is what you want. You may not even want this. I don't know. If you click on the body, you can see what's highlighted up here. I think we can delete this too. Yeah, that's pretty good. It looks like these are going into something. Maybe I deleted it. Let me roll this back up. We don't need that. Is it this one we might need? Now, the nice thing with having these bodies is you also have a reference of how it went in there. So that's also nice. That can definitely help you. I'm assuming this is just a weighted base. And that's... I leave it up to you. You can keep or delete whatever you want, don't want. I guess I'm just saying what I would do here. I would probably get rid of these things. I'd probably then go to... I'd probably save this. Oh, I guess we're off break now. I said 25, didn't I? I can finish answering this. Go to an assembly and just drop this in here. And again, this can be however you want to align it. So again, float. For me, I would probably want this to be the top plane. So this is what I mean. You can see it's like floating here, which is weird. So I would make this. And something like this is somewhat organic. So I would probably, if it were me, oh, this makes sense, to have the right plane centered on the cord going out the back. So maybe we can leave that as is. The front plane also seems centered on here. So you could probably, it might just be a matter, if it were me, it might just be a matter of putting the top plane where it is. But at this point, again, you could just file, save as, and save it out as a part file. And again, you can say, what was it, Infuser? Is that what it was called? Infuser guts. Save it. And I think when you open it back up, it'll also get rid of all these sketches. Let me double check that. So I saved it out as Infuser guts as a part file. There you go. See, now it's nice and clean. So now, as far as I'm concerned, this is easier to work with and work around. This is also like you can like click through these and just see what it is you want to keep and not keep at this point. So far, I would probably keep all these things. For what it's worth, I forgot to mention this to you all. This is an awesome PC board. Feel free to just, I do not expect your PC boards to have any detail. They can simply just be extruded rectangles and rendered green or colored green. And we'll get to that when we get to the key shop portion. Again, the guts can just simply be representational. They don't have to be detailed, as far as I'm concerned. This to me looks like a battery box. So if you are going with this, I could be wrong. Never mind. This could be a cord to an outlet. Anyway, short answer. That works for me, Giovanna. So did that answer your question? Cool. All right. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, again, this next half hour is like the equivalent of work in class time. If I had the ability to physically walk to your desk and just say, how are you doing, I would. So I guess, feel free to reach out to me with questions. Again, I would advise you to use this time to either set up the files that I provided for you, go through the demo. If I went through that a bit quickly, take your time to go through it now. You know what I forgot to do? Shoot, I'll do it now. Oh no, but yeah, that's fine. I'll stop my video now, both recordings, so that they don't get too long. I forgot to stop it before the break, but I realized it may be helpful